plenary speaker, Edurne Goñi-Alzua, and she's going to talk about her topic is dialects and identity, how dialects define their speakers, the case of Cockney. Edurne Goñi-Alzua is a doctor in English philology and has a degree in Spanish philology as well. She is currently working at the Public University of Navarre in the Department of Human Sciences and Didactics and in UNIR as a teacher in the degrees of Primary and Infants Education and in the Master of Secondary Education. Her current investigations delve deep into the use of translation in the class of the second language acquisition. Nevertheless, although she is working in the field of teaching, her field of expertise is translation and dialects, together with the effect of censorship in the rendered text. So thank you very much, Edurne. We're very glad to have you here, and please start.
Okay. Well, thank you for your kind words, Julia. And well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for having invited me to this conference. It's an honor being in this university, and obviously all of you for your coming. Well, I'm going to show you the contents of my presentation. Well, this is the title, and let's see. I'm going to speak about dialects around and defining as the identity, speech community and language attitudes. I'm going to focus on Cockney and Pygmalion and how this play, Pygmalion, has been translated into Spanish. Okay, however, before starting, I must confess that once I gossiped. I was scrolling up and down my mobile, I saw this title, Lo que tuvo que aprender Kate Middleton para ser duquesa, cómo bajar el carruaje y otras lecciones. In English, what Kate Middleton had to learn to become a duchess, how to get off a carriage and other lessons. Really interesting. So I clicked on it to see, well, what should I have learned if I were to become a royal? And I saw this. This is the article, the whole article, okay? But I would like you to focus on the colors. In blue, the beginning and the end. And here we have the knowledge that she had to learn to get down from a carriage, how to get present from the public, how to vote to somebody, etc. In blue. And in green, what? Dialects. Okay? Well, I have translated the sentences related with the dialect that was in Spanish, and please allow me to read them. First is her accent. According to one of her friends from university, Kate's accent is unrecognizable. It changed completely while she was going out with William. Up to that moment, the engagement, only her family and friends had listened to her and knew what she spoke like. Among them, this friend explains how, in 2010, Kate sounded totally different. Her voice had completely changed. She sounded really elegant, and definitely she did not speak that way when we were at school. And last one. Kate must speak as the royals speak, with that novel English known as received pronunciation, which Queen Elizabeth II, her relatives, the nobility, the aristocracy, and the members of high society speak, a posh English with which Kate did not grow up. Well, in June, a librarian friend of mine recommended me this book. I don't know if you know it. It's the Man Booker Prize of 2005. And well, magic happened. In this book, the main character goes back to a place where he had spent his best holidays when a child. Now, in the very guest house, lives a colonel. In the first part of the book, the colonel is described by references, only by references, and we learn that he is serious, retired, likes plain clothes, especially grey and brown, has his hair cut very short every week. So I don't know you, but I imagine a retired person from the army more or less like this, right? But in the second part, at the beginning, we have the first reference to his personality through the dialect. Allow me please to read it. It says, he has the glazed flawlessness of an actor who has been playing the same part for too long. I wonder if he really is an old army man. He does a good job hiding his Belfast accent, but hints of it keep escaping like trapped wind. And anyway, why hide it? Why does he fear it might tell us? Miss Dovaso, the owner of the house, confides that she has spotted him on more than one occasion slipping into church of a Sunday for early mass. A Belfast Catholic colonel? Ram, very. Okay, so he's described by her accent. Well, and Twitter. Let's see. Entitled, Dios mío, el bendito acento. Oops, sorry. Let's see if I can open it. Oops. My goodness.
You have to go out.
No.
Maybe you have to exit the
Yeah.
application.
Maybe I have to.
Yeah, then you can.
All right. Groups? No. It worked. Here.
Revising your equations, here's how they go. Einstein's theory of relativity is E equals mc squared. This means that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. The Pythagorean equation is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This means that for all right-angled triangles, the square on the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. How am I doing?
It's really educational.
Okay, here we
and
go.
slightly erotic.
This is the last one. Pi is the circumference divided by the diameter of any circle. It's impossible to know the exact value, but pi is approximately 3.1415926535897932846
Oh, beautiful stuff! Yeah.
Okay. So now I have to go back to the link, so maybe I'm not going to put it. Do you like mathematics more now? Yeah. Apart from his voice, how well he speaks? Yes? Okay. And what does the broadcast say at the end? Beautiful stuff. I suppose he doesn't say beautiful stuff because of mathematics. Yeah? Well, summer, Sunday morning, I happened to watch this on TV. I don't know if you know this TV series. It's about a detective and a writer. And this is the first chapter of the first season. And we are going to, we present the following dialogue. I'm going to put the script. Does it work? Here. Here's the script. Should be. Yeah, here.
What?
Nothing. No, it's just the way your brow furrows when you're thinking. It's cute. I mean, not if you're playing poker, then it'd be deadly, but otherwise.
Can I ask you a question?
Shoot.
Why are you here? You don't care about the victim, so you aren't here for justice. You don't care that the guy's aping your book, so you aren't here because you're outraged. So what is it, Rick?
Here.
Are you here to annoy me?
I'm here for the story.
The story.
Why those people? Why those murders?
Sometimes there is no story. Sometimes the guy is just a psychopath.
There's always a story. Always a chain of events makes everything make sense. Take you, for example. Under normal circumstances, you should not be here. Most smart, good-looking women become lawyers, not cops. And yet, here you are. Why?
I don't know, Rick. You're the novelist, you tell me.
Well, you're not bridge and tunnel. Don't trace the boroughs when you talk, so that means Manhattan. That means money. You went to college, probably a pretty good one. You had options. Yeah, you had lots of options. Better options. More socially acceptable options. And you still chose this. That tells me something happened. Not to you. You're wounded, but you're not that wounded. It was somebody you cared about. It was someone you loved. And you probably could have lived with that, but the person responsible was never caught. And that, Detective Beckett, is why you're here.
Well, enough. So, here, it is her accent, what implies that something strange happens. There is a hidden story behind her. She's not in the right place for speakers with such an accent. Summer, again. I read this book. I suppose you know it. It's Michael Caine, a Cockney actor. And I have taken two ideas from this book. Allow me please to read them. The first is, during Second World War, my mother took us to Norfolk. I used to play with a group of evacuated because the mothers of the village did not want the children to play with us. They thought we were too rude, and our dialect made them suspicious, to say it in a soft way. And the second, we're going to mention Annan. She was from Mother Dominique, she was from Belgium, and she became really famous by singing. And we're going to mention this novel, The Fountainhead, which is really philosophical, really difficult to read. And the dialogue. He said, your daughter is called Dominique after the singer Anne? No, I answered. After the main character of The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I still remember his astonishment. How is it possible that an ignorant plonker Cockney has read that novel? Yeah, again, dialects. Another relevant person, Mandela. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And Goethe, the German writer. Well, he was sent to Leipzig as a student to learn proper German. At the beginning, he tries to follow the rules, but after a few months, he shows his discontent with this boring, normalized language and takes pride of his Southern German traditions of speaking. In this context, he coins the famous quotation that it is dialect where the souls find its respiration. Neither Nelson Mandela nor Goethe were philologists. But for them, dialects seem to be really important. I suppose you know him, yeah? The footballer, David Beckham. According to research carried out by Dahu and Halmin in 2016, in an article entitled Out Cockney in Beckham 20 Years On, an investigation into age-dropping and teglottaling from the University of Manchester, they reached the following conclusion. They compared the first recording ever of this person and another recording of his latest years. And they discovered that he had when he was 18 years old, he dropped all the age in his speech. But when he was 39 years old, only the 30%. Yeah? So, why is that important, the way in which this person speaks, that they have some research in the University of Manchester? Do you know these memes? If I had a British accent, I'd never shut up. I know why you should be here if you don't speak English real good. And this, last Saturday. Andaluz, eres un cateto. Cateto, uncultured person, yeah? Okay. And now, we have people defining that people from Andalusia don't speak in a bad way, they speak correctly. And they put the example of three of the most important writers in Spanish literature. And I don't know for you, but for me, this is painful. Right? Okay. All these things in less than a year. 6 months, more or less. So, let's summarize. In the printing press, in literature, cinema, on the radio, on TV, on memes, in life, dialects surround and define us. And there is this sentence which says that, tell me what you speak like and I will tell you who you are. Well, scholars have studied this question and found that the dialect which we speak is another aspect which defines our identity. However, what's identity? According to the Collins Dictionary, identity is who you are, and the identity of a person or place is the characteristics which they have that distinguish them from others. According to Davis and Harre, identity is about the constant and ongoing positioning of individuals in interactions with others. So now, if we integrate the idea of language into this definition, we find that, Stanley explains, dialects affect the identity formation in that dialects help confirm the sense of belonging to a certain community. Kovacs says more or less the same. A dialect is thus a symbol of a community's sense of belonging and of the sense of local identity. Now we move from the individual to the community. The sense of local national identity manifests in one's adherence to cultural patterns, coupled by a high emotional load. This enables the individual to categorize into a group. Okay? Another idea by Kovacs and Halupka is that language use is inseparable from the social, political, moral, and economic ideas attached to languages or varieties used in a community. Consequently, everywhere in the world, a dialect is a symbol of a community's sense of belonging and of the sense of local identity. And at this point, we must introduce and define the concept of speech community. According to Moreno, who has invested a lot on this topic, a speech community is a group of people who share a language and a set of rules and values of sociolinguistic nature, the same linguistic attitudes, the same rules, the same criteria to value socially the linguistic facts, and the same sociolinguistic patterns. In all speech communities, there is a model of prestige which is associated with what is correct, adequate, and normative. And here we have, in the first picture, we have Elizabeth I of Castile, Queen of Spain, and de Breja is the writer of the first grammar of Spanish in 1492, who stated that the most correct dialect spoken in Spain was Castilian, the one which Queen Elizabeth spoke, obviously in honor of the Queen. In the second picture, Queen Elizabeth II of England, who speaks with the RP pronunciation of the BBC English. So this is the top, and now let's go to the other side of the scale. Do you know them? Some of them? Yeah? We have el señor Tomás, Marianico el Corto, el dulce Sacapuntas, Chiquito de la Calzada. They were comedians who used their dialects, Andalusian, el ceceo, and from Andalusia, and the Aragonese, to make people laugh. And in England, do you know Michael Caine? Do you remember Michael Caine? The same. Cockney speakers make people laugh. The sound of Cockney make people laugh. Okay. So, we speakers develop language attitudes defined as any affective, cognitive, or behavioral index of evaluative reaction toward different language varieties or speakers. And language attitudes refers to a speaker's subjective point held about a particular language or dialect, which reflects their language preference and their positive or negative opinions about the language or language variety. Oops, sorry. It's curious, the fact that most of these attitudes are unconscious and may differ from the consciously held attitudes about the same variant, right? So if we think of these 4 people, or 5 people, we're not going to hold negative values. But if we unconsciously listen to them speak, we're going to say, what's this? Okay? So this is really important. Well, the way listeners judge a group reflects their attitudes towards the speakers of that group. This was said by Melander. But what happens when we feel the need to speak another dialect, leaving us behind? And what happens when our dialect is despised by other speech communities in our country? And now we're going to focus on Pygmalion, on the play. Allow me to introduce George Bernard Shaw, the writer of Pygmalion. Well, and here, as you can see, we can read some words like Cockney, child's, language, forgotten, Tottenham, nothing. We will go back to them. These are words by the main characters of Pygmalion, Eliza Little. We will go back and unjumble them. Okay, well, I'm sure all of you have heard about this dialect. I'm saying dialect because, according to Jimeno, a dialect is a geographical and social variation due to the fact that speakers have both a geographical location and a social description, right? So it's not sociolect, it's not dialect, it's, let's say, a mixture, more or less. Well, Cockney developed along the 14th century, sharing features with other southern dialects in East London, around the church of St. Mary Le Vaux in Cheapside Street. This picture below, you can see the tower of the church. Those above are the Queen and Peregrine, which are a typical way in which they get dressed. Nowadays, Cockney is spoken more or less in those neighborhoods: Aldgate, Pelham Green, Bow, Hackney, etc. Some features of this dialect in the middle, in the line. There are some variations of diphthongs, like mat instead of mate, you instead of you, oi instead of o. For instance, they have obviously the glottal stop in Peter, like Peter. They change between V and F, nest instead of no, the dropping or adding of the H. They also place an A behind a gerund. They don't say coming, they say a coming. They obviously have different lexicon, like Totifold colors, which is the person who likes to dress with brilliant colors, and obviously the rhyming slang, Nielsen pins instead of gin. Well, however, for us, and now what is more important is its sociolinguistics. This is the considerations we other communities of speech have towards it. Well, and allow me to read these three 3 sentences, 3 among many others, which claimed against this dialect. Of all the non-standard forms of English, Cockney is the most generally despised and downtrodden. It was said by Matthews in 1972. The Cockney mode of speech, with its unpleasant twang, is a modern corruption without legitimate credentials and is unworthy of being the speech of any person in the capital of empire. This is a conference on the teaching of English in London elementary schools from 1909. Pygmalion was written in 1912, by Matthews himself again. Halliwell said that the metropolitan county presents little in its dialect worthy of remark. The words of Matthews are very important because Matthews was a Cockney himself who was able to go to university, and he obviously his expertise was in Cockney. He wrote a book on Cockney in the decade of 1930s, and he himself redid it in 1972. It's a bit old, but the most important aspect of this book is that he himself was a Cockney speaker. And well, you can, I don't know, but for me, these sentences are painful when we think about dialect, and the spice about it is really negative and painful in general. Well, and now allow me please to introduce Eliza, the main character of Pygmalion, who tells us her problem. I want to be a lady in a flower shop instead of selling at the corner of Tottenham Road. They won't take me unless I can talk more genteel. He said he could teach me. I suppose you know the work. She's a girl who wants to work in a flower shop instead of working in the streets. He goes to a phonetician so that he teaches her how to speak English, proper English. Well, in addition, allow me please to introduce Mr. Doolittle, Eliza's father, who, unlike Eliza, tells us his needs. I'll have to learn to speak middle-class language for you instead of speaking proper English. So, can you feel his identity here? Yeah? So, Eliza learns, and by learning proper English, we move from a flower seller at the entrance of the theatres to a duchess. And when she becomes a duchess, she realizes that she can't do anything in life because I can't go back to it. I mean, she's not a duchess, she can speak like a duchess, she's not a duchess, so she can't be in that world. So she's supposedly should go back to her previous life. But she says, I can't go back to it. You told me you know that when a child is brought to a foreign country, it picks up the language in a few weeks and forgets its own. Well, I'm a child in your country. I have forgotten my own language and can speak nothing but yours. That's the real break-off with the corner of Tottenham Court Road. We haven't jumbled the words of Eliza, okay? So, as we can see, is the dialect what marks the difference. And this is the key factor in this play, the dialect, which the main character speaks. This dialect marks the social stratification featuring the British society of those times, strongly criticized by Bernard Shaw. So, going back to the previous definition, a dialect is a symbol of a community sense of belonging and a sense of local identity. By missing our dialect, we lose the sense of belonging and the sense of local identity. This is what we see in Eliza. Well, and obviously this is Eliza's trauma. All these notes, all these quotes, all these ideas and examples to establish one of the main problems of translation. Dialects whenever they become basic as markers of both personal and group identity as in display. The first concept which we must bear in mind regarding translation is that translation is an act of communication between two languages. Thus, translators must transfer not only the linguistic aspects of the original text, but also its communicative intentions and the global atmosphere. When we include dialects in a text, on the one hand, we are adding a stylistic element to enrich it in a depiction of the different characters, and on the other, we are equaling both the meaning and the form, making them interdependent. This way, there is no clear line between the what and the how. Hence, we get to translation of dialects. Dialects must be translated. If the content is interconnected with the form, when translating, we must assume an appropriate form, a language variety in the target language, especially when the dialect has, according to what is stated by Monti, a symbolic function. This is, the dialect is a tool used to symbolize what a character is and to establish oppositions among the characters of the play, due to the fact that they project a specific ideology which distance and stigmatize them. Well, many scholars have and are researching on this topic, and I am conscious that some of them reject the possibility to translate dialects, such as Rosa Rabadán, okay, to mention a Spanish one. But, well, I'm not that certain that dialects can't and shouldn't be translated. In this slide, you can see those scholars who I have consulted to prepare this presentation, who talked about the translation of dialects and the possibility of translation of dialects. I counted up 23 of them. This is a lot of scholars. All of them have proposed the following procedures to translate dialects. 17. But we're going to focus on 3, which are the ones used by the translators of Pygmalion into Spanish. Neutralization, functional equivalence, and using run expressions or informal vulgar language. Well, so, focusing on the Spanish translations of the play, we count with 6 different works. The first is the canonical one, let's say it, is the translation of 1919, which was performed by Julio Bruta. And to translate Cockney, we found the counterpart in Chile, a dialect spoken in Madrid. As I have said, this is the canonical translation of Pygmalion into Spanish. Then we have a copy performed in 1943, in which the meta-author copies most of the translation, the first translation, but changes the dialect into colloquial forms, in general colloquial connotations. Then we have a translation or retranslation in 1952. According to some scholars, this is a translation because it was done in Argentina. It was not done in Spain. And the first and second works were done in Spain. Other scholars talk about retranslation, right? So both possibilities. In 1952, in which the meta-author chooses lunfardo, which is another dialect. I'll talk about it. Then we have a retranslation of 1982, which vulgar connotations. a copy of that first translation of 1999, in which the meta-author does the same. Just instead of Shelley, he uses vulgar words in Spanish. And the last one is a retranslation of 2016. This was done for the page with a critical introduction, and in this case, the meta-author neutralizes the dialect. So these 6 different versions. Well, if we group them, we can establish 3 main categories. In the first group, we have the copy of 1943 by Ricardo Baeza with colloquial connotations, the retranslation of 1982 by Juan Leita, who also translated it into Catalan with vulgar connotations, and the copy of 1990 with vulgar connotations too. We don't know who did this. We think that it was the editor, because there are some slight variations apart from the vocabulary. But in the edition appears the name of Julio Bruta, the first translator. But obviously somebody else has worked in the text. These works feature a vulgar, uncultured woman, which is not the same as a person who has a specific dialect, because here we lack the geographical reference, and we focus only on the social scale and on the lack of education of the person. The second group, just the retranslation of 2016, in which Cisneros, the translator, neutralizes the dialect. In this meta-text, the dialect is neutralized, and by following this option, the text lessens the force of the original dialects, and, on the other hand, loses the functions which the dialect performs, suffering from a significant modification which affects the character of the play and produces not only a difference, but also an opposite aesthetical effect to that of the original text. Additionally, the Spanish spectators are deprived of the effect which the primary audience has. Domenech Rico, in a study about this version, state that as the meta-author neutralizes the dialect, unquote, he deprives the reader of one of the most important elements of the characterization of the portrayal of the character, and even of one of the fundamental messages of the play, the social differences which appear through the language, aspect on which Cisneros, the meta-author, insists in his introduction to the play. Apart from this, it's a very good edition. And the third group. This is composed of those translations in which the meta-authors have found a functional equivalent dialect. The 3 geolects, Cockney, Shelley, the geolect from Madrid, and Lunfardo, the geolect from Buenos Aires, respond to the same parameters of geography, as the 3 of them are spoken in specific neighborhoods of the city capitals, Shelley in Madrid, Lunfardo in Buenos Aires, and social ascription. The 3 of them are spoken by the lowest social classes of those cities. And obviously the 3 of them share the same consideration by the different speech communities. And by finding this functional equivalence, Eliza sounds the same as in the original text. That's what happens when we translate this play into Spanish. Are we able to maintain Eliza's identity? Spanish. We can say that Spanish and Argentinian audiences are fortunate because, from the point of view of the communities of speech, they understand the play as they comprehend the struggle which Eliza suffers due to her dialect and to her loss of identity. Okay, conclusions. So, according to Chambers, I'm going to read this quote, for centuries, people have recognized, at least tacitly, that your speech expresses who we are and how we feel, as well as what is in our minds. The social uses of language are so deeply ingrained in our human nature that they were thought to be beyond human comprehension, as were consciousness and genetic coding. And we have seen this through different examples taken from real life, those at the very beginning. In Pygmalion, the main message appears intertwined with the dialects which Elisa speaks. This is the reason why we are not able to separate form and meaning, as we have said before, and the reason why we must translate the dialect. Moreover, the dialect speech proves to be a key factor in localizing, characterizing, and codifying the characters, so it should therefore be taken into careful consideration when conveyed from a source to a target language. Nonetheless, we all know that rendering language variations is a challenge due to the fact that translators can create unintended effects in a target environment due to non-equivalence and at the level of connotations that may be associated with the linguistic varieties in the two cultures. This was stated by Cyril Boulot in 2013. Additionally, Eugene Aida pointed that no two words in any two languages ever match completely in designative, denotative, and associative, connotative meanings. What makes it difficult to find in the target context convincing counterparts conveying the same connotations and stereotypical traits of meaning of the geolect or sociolect. However, if we find the function of the dialect in the source text, we will get the key to determine the adequate translation techniques. In our case, the featuring function of the geolect makes it possible for the translators to find a geolect with the same function in the target language. And this is where Bruta and Macia master the translations, and they found an equivalent to Cockney in the countries. Although, according to Bruta himself, some people complained about his choice back in 1919. And allow me to read a sentence, and I'm going to vary it a bit. Translating a dialect is a problem with many solutions, all of them unsatisfactory. It was stated by Sainz in the year 2000. But I have included a small variation. Translating a dialect is a problem with many solutions, almost all of them unsatisfactory. In our case, we see that the choice of dialects it's been a satisfactory solution. No, yeah. And allow me to finish with some words by Professor Nida, who pointed out that expert translators and interpreters usually view languages as wonderfully creative instruments for communication, in which ideas can be expressed in a fabulous number of different forms. And this is all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Edurne. It was very, very interesting. Me as a translator, I really enjoyed it. So do we have any questions about Edurne's speech and conference?
I am so convincing. Couldn't imagine. I'm going to tell my students.
So I have some questions. The first part, which was concerned with identity, we talked a little bit about identity and dialect, and how some famous people had changed their dialect, or we could even also talk about idialect right here, because they are changing not only their dialect, but their way of talking, their words, maybe their favorite sentences, maybe, well, we could say. So these really affect identity. David Beckham, for example, he changed his dialect, and Kate Middleton was it. And how do you think it affects identity? And do you think they create maybe a secondary identity for the public, or is it just thoughts that came to my mind, and I was just really interested?
Well, I think that if you feel the need to do it, or you want to do it, it's different. In the case of a person who wants to change the dialect, this is not going to affect their identity. I mean, take the case of Kate Middleton. She is what she is. She's middle class, but now she's a duchess. And it is something that she did in a voluntary way. In the case of David Beckham, I think it's more or less the same. He needs to belong to another social class, so he changes his way of speaking. But the problem for me, and for many scholars, is when you have to do it on your own. And in this case, yes, in some cases, people don't belong, feel that they don't belong to the new place. Okay. In some way, this is unconscious. For instance, I have a colleague who, in his village, he called the women using la María, la Raquel. When he is with us in Pamplona, we don't use that la. He never talks about la Edurne, in my case, never. Okay? This is unconscious, and this is no problem for him. When he is in his village, he speaks like the village. When he is in Pamplona, he speaks like in Pamplona. Okay? So when you do it, when it's unconscious, I mean, or when you want to do it, there are no problems. The real problem is when you have.
When you are forced to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have some questions? Because I have more. Oh, okay, Miguel. You have the microphone there.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Goñi, for your presentation. I have read the latest edition of Pygmalion in Spanish, and I remember that the first time that Eliza Doolittle shows up, Cisneros, the translator, includes a footnote, and he says that he has decided to neutralize her dialect because that's the stage director decision. So what do you think of the role that a stage director and even actors play in recreating dialects, specifically in the case of a text that's written to be performed later on the stage? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I personally know Cisneros, but I don't agree with his work. Even he doesn't agree with his work. He has just published an article saying that, well, he didn't do it well, but translation is a bit difficult, especially when we talk about the stage. I haven't included this in my speech because we could be here for hours. But theatre is a very specific way of speaking. When actors go out, they need to have written, clear words, because as Julio César Santoyo used to say, you can't raise your hand in the theatre and say, stop, could you please repeat because I haven't understood it? Okay, so the role. I think that it is the function of the translator, and the function of the actors, and the function of people, of the directors in theatre is something different. Yeah. Obviously, translating Pygmalion nowadays is difficult, really difficult, because this dialect is no longer spoken. All right, but I consider that, and some scholars like Raquel Merino, for instance, think that one thing is the translator who does the work either for the stage or for the paper, and another thing is the function of the director, and we shouldn't leave them the how to utter those words. That's my point of view, at least.
Do we have more questions? I think I have one last question. It is quite, I will do a short version of it. Pygmalion is, the strategy that we talked about, like it's the most satisfactory, you said, was the use of another dialect which is known for the target audience. In Madrid, for example. I think that works for a play. But if we use this in a novel, for example, what do you think the most effective strategy is? Is it still the use of a dialect, or maybe there is another strategy which could work better in a novel?
From my point of view, what we must pay attention to is, as I have said, the function of the dialect. I mean, there are some times in which it's useless to translate a dialect. For instance, when it features a couple of characters, or it appears just in a certain point, in really specific moments. Maybe that. In those moments, by saying something like he said in his dialect, or featuring the character by saying that he is a person with this specific character, maybe good. But for me, what is important is to translate them, because the other way we're missing something, and we're missing something important, because dialects feature, as we have seen, dialects feature people. And for instance, we have had a beautiful presentation about translation of the Niger dialect, a dialect from black population. We know in Spanish we can feature how black people speak. Yes? Say, La que se avecina. There is a black person speaking in La que se avecina. And it's something like we recognize as being typical from black people, that speech. So for me it's important to find the function and try to find something which is equal in the target language. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we don't have any more now we have someone. I think we have maybe for 2 more questions. So you.
Thank you so much for your interesting presentation. It's really interesting, in fact. So I would like to start from where you stopped talking about the black language, if you like. You can go back to the United States, where we have Ebonics, or American black dialects, which is in fact a kind of revolution for these kind of people. So trying to have their own language instead of using, let's say, the standard language, English, in the United States. But I would like to relate it to something else very interesting, which is teaching. Since you said that we shouldn't translate the dialects, because in fact I believe that it's a kind of betrayal for the meaning. Whatsoever we do, we cannot give the true meaning of this language, let's say dialect. So what do you think, is it really interesting in our educational systems to teach in dialects, especially in the elementary years, the first 6, 7 till, or primary school, in fact, if you'd like. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we had another question, and I think that would be the last one.
Thank you very much for the very inspiring speaking. And I didn't do any research with dialect before, but it seems that recently a lot of people are doing this. And one of my previous teacher, or possible previous teacher, he's also doing the Aboriginal languages. And in my country, and some of my friends also doing dialects with the widely used language. And I'm just wondering, in doing research with dialects, so the research just collect the language samples and analyze, or in a way of descriptive research, or is there a well-established set of method of doing research with dialects? So I want to know about the method of doing research with dialects.
Methods, as many as...
So I mean that if people do research with dialects, is there a set of established methodology of doing it, or just doing descriptive analysis? Thank you.
Welcome. Well, no. Methods as many as scholars. Right. Dialects have mostly been studied from the point of view of theory. And some scholars have given different, let me see. Here. Well, these are ways proposed by different scholars to translate dialects. Some of them are just theory, some of them are practice and practical research, but it depends on the scholar. There is not one trend. In fact, for instance, Turi, a very famous, very famous scholar and translator, used to talk about his hat. When I am a scholar, I wear the hat of a scholar, and I think as a scholar, and I state what should be done. But when I wear the hat of a translator, I do what I can with the text. Okay? So some of them are practice works, but most of them are theories. Yes. Welcome.
Okay, so thank you very much, Edurne. It was a very interesting conference, so thank you very much.
Thanks.
We are now in the parallel sessions, so just room to DO1 and DO2. Thank you.